Hey, J-Dub, let's go through that wrist protocol together. So we're looking at what we want the wrist to be able to do and how we can help improve our movement patterns, what we can do on the daily for it. So we should be able to get into actively holding a position about here without having to use an external force like the ground or say an object like the hand. We want to have this position if we're doing high plank, push-up, if we're load bearing on those hands. You're going to be able to go into extension a little bit more range of motion there than flexion, and then you should be able to radially deviate here and then ulnarly deviate as well. You're gonna have more movement here than you will here. Okay, so we're looking at what this wrist can do. And now let's talk about a daily movement pattern that you can practice that will really help with your wrist mobility and keeping you out of pain. So this is wrist cars. I would recommend putting your arm on something like, I just have 2 yoga blocks built up here. But what this does is this allows you to kind of block out movement from your forearm, because we need to be able to isolate the wrist itself. So I would say probably 4 to 5 movements where you just go into flexion and extension. And I'm just pinning my forearm down here while I do that. And then I'm gonna explore, how does this feel, right? How does that deviation feel there as I go in and out? And if I feel a little sticky somewhere, well then I might want to slow that down. Instead of speeding up, we slow down, path of most resistance. And I might just try to work into that position a little bit. I'm left-handed, so I tend to do my left hand first. I would recommend doing your dominant side first. It's interesting because my non-dominant, my right wrist tends to get a little stickier. So now I'm going to take those individual movements going into flexion and extension, deviation for the radial and ulnar side, and I'm going to make that into a circle. I'm going to try to smooth that out a little bit. So we're going to go slow through this. We go down, in, up, and out. Back to down, in, up, out. And I'm really gonna take my time going maybe clockwise, and then we do the exact same thing going counterclockwise, in and down. So out, up, in, and down. I don't know if you can hear that, but I got some Rice Krispie treats in there, which is great. I have been playing a lot lately. This is something that I certainly need to be working on too, all of this, especially as we start to flick more. We need these simple but very, very effective daily cars. So once you do the cars, then we can apply the pails and rails system, a more isometric loading type activity for the wrist. And that is where it'll look like something that you have done before and we did together. So I would recommend the cars daily because I think that's going to be a huge benefactor for your wrist health. And then this is wrist strengthening. So I do want you to hold this position for a couple of minutes before you start to load into it. So put a timer on yourself, and remember that if it's really rough that day, coming forward is going to make it easier. Leaning back into this is going to be much more challenging. That's how you're going to load that wrist a lot more. So if I want to be here, I'm going to find the most intense position that I can handle, and I am going to actively press down, okay, and then hold that for about 10 seconds. Don't come out of it, but just release that tension. So I've got my elbow pits are forward here, right? I've driven my shoulder blades down my back. I'm loaded in my hips a little bit, and then I'm pressing down for 10 seconds. So if there was something underneath my hands, I would absolutely be crushing it. And then I release after 10 counts, take a break, go back in, repeat this 3 to 4 times. And then what you can do from there is, again, try to stay loaded. They're not gonna go anywhere, but try to lift your fingertips. So let me give you a side view here. So I'm loaded, and they're not gonna go anywhere, but we're trying, this is the rails side of things where we're trying to, regressive position here, and I'm trying to lift. You can see they barely go anywhere, and ideally I go into a position where I'm so loaded that they do not come off the ground, but I'm trying to get them off of the ground. And I do that for about a 5 count hold. Relax, do another 5 count hold, repeat that maybe 4 times or so. These are some beginning hold times and sequences for you to try. So let me know how that goes, and I'm happy to jump on do a session about it and do a session just on wrist. Since we had started with hips, I feel like I kind of was a bit too succinct with the wrist, and I do think the wrist is pretty important. So let me know how that goes. Talk to you soon.